How's it going, folks? It's me again, your boy Tabo, and this is another lesson on Three.js for beginners. And today we will be covering geometries. Now we will cover the 5 basic geometries that you can find in Three.js. Now without further ado, let's just jump right in. Okay, so now first thing, just like the previous tutorial, make sure that you're in the right project folder because this is where everything will be saved. And so in order to continue, then we're going to create another file. We'll call it index.html. So I just want to also make you aware that when we run the HTTP server, it will automatically run the index file, and that's what you will see. So when you run the server and then you go to the local host, that's what you will see. So with the files that we have created, make sure that the current one is named index. So now that we have that, yes, we will open it. From there, we'll just create an HTML5 document, just like before. And then we'll create a script tag, and then the source will be module. Okay, so inside, then we will import our library. So we'll say import as, okay. So now we've imported our module. So before we can see anything on our screen, we need to have a renderer, we need to have a camera, and we need to have a scene. Okay, so we will start by creating our renderer. Okay, before I do that, we will also create a canvas element because this is what we will be using to render. Okay, so we'll give it an ID of canvas. Now we can continue. So I'll say const renderer equals to new 3.webgl renderer. The canvas property will assign it the value of our canvas. Set anti-alias to true. Okay, so then we will then create our camera. So we'll say camera equals to new 3.perspective camera. Okay, so inside here we'll say the field of view is 45, and then we will pass it an integer. We want to use the computed styles values, so we'll say pass int, and then inside there I will say window dot get computed style. Inside there I will give it canvas, so we want the computed style of our canvas element, and then we say get property value. The property value that we want to get is our width. Then we'll say divide by, so the property width will be divided by the property height. Okay, so we'll just copy that just to save time, and we'll change that to height. So it's basically width divided by height. That's our aspect ratio. Then we will give it the near clip plane. This is basically how close the object has to be to the camera before it clips. We'll give it a distance of 1, and then the far clip plane will be 1000. Okay, and then now we will create our scene equals to new 3.scene. And then inside our scene, this is where we will add all our 3D objects, which will be rendered on our browser. The next thing is I will create a light, because in order for anything to be visible, we need to have a light in the scene. So I will create a point light. Say point light equals to new 3-point light. I will just leave it as default, and the default just gives you the color white. So now we've got our renderer, camera, scene, point light. The next thing that we will create is geometry, and what we will start with, it's called a box geometry, but it is a cube. Okay, so we'll say const box geo equals to new 3.box geometry, and then it takes 6 values. That is the width, height, depth, and width, height, depth segments. Okay, so we'll just give it a width of 1. We'll just make it 1 so that it will be an equal sized cube, and so we'll give it segments of 10 on each side. So then we will create a material. So I will say box mat equals to new 3. So we'll use a mesh standard material, and we will give it a color of green, and then we will create a box mesh. So mesh equals to box mesh equals to new 3.mesh, And in here we will add our box mat and box geo. Okay, so now we will create a function called render, and it is in this function that everything will be rendered. So just to make sure that everything is correct, first of all we need to add the stuff to the scene. So scene has a method called add. So say scene.add. We will add our point light, and then we will add our box mesh. Now that we've added those, one thing I want to do is to adjust our camera, because I want to make sure that the camera can see our 3D objects which will be rendered. So we'll say camera.position.z equals to, I'll make it 10. The y position, I'll make it 5. Okay, so it will be looking from the top down. The light, also need to adjust the light, so put it in the right position, otherwise nothing will be visible. So the position y will be 10. I think I'll give it basically the same values. Okay, so similar values, not exactly the same. So point light dot position dot z will be equal to 5. Okay, so now that we've got that, we're also gonna use the look at method. So basically the camera has a method called look at. That means the object on which the camera will focus. So it doesn't matter what position the camera is in, it will always focus, have a center of focus, and this is what we want to set up. So we want that center of focus to be our scene.position, which will be located at 0 point, at the 0 position, which is basically the center of our scene. So that's where we want it to focus, because that's where our geometry will be when we first render it. And then from then on we'll say renderer dot render, and here we will have our scene and camera in that order. One last thing, I need to set the size, or I'll say renderer dot, so I need to set the size of our canvas, of our renderer basically, which uses the canvas of course, and we will set that to the size of our window. So say window dot inner width, window dot inner height. So that will be the size of our renderer. Now that we've got all of that, so now I will run our HTTP server. If you remember how we did that, it's HTTP server, and then you just run it. And so you go to your local host, and that's where everything should be running. Okay, let's have a look if we have any. Says module not found. Okay, that's my mistake, sorry. I said source instead of the type of script, not source. Silly mistake. Okay, so there we go. So now we have our scene, but it is blank. Yes, we need to call our render function. That's why nothing is visible. There we go. So now we have our cube. As you can see, it's located right here in the middle and it's green. Now to make it a bit more exciting, we will say let's say box mesh dot rotation dot y plus equals 0.01. Okay, and for that to work we need to create another function, and that function will be animate. Okay, so inside of animate, this is where we will call our render function, and then after that we'll say we'll use the request animation frame, and then we will call animate. Cool. And then underneath here, then we can call our animate function to run it for the first time, and then it will just keep running. So there we go. So now we've got our cube. Okay, so this is the first basic geometry that you can create in Three.js. There are many, like about 20 if I'm not mistaken, but we will only focus on 5, just so that you can get an idea of how the properties are set up, and just how you just use the primitive geometries which exist already. Okay, so now that we've got our beautiful cube here spinning around, what we're gonna do is, because it would be nice for us to be able to move our object around, so we are gonna use an API called that GUI. Okay, so just to save myself time, I'm gonna import that from here. So we'll say import GUI from So it is located in the library folder, and it's called dat.gui.module.js. So this is it. So just type this out and it will import, yes, the GUI module for you. And what we're going to do with that is we're going to create a GUI that will allow us to manipulate the properties of our geometry. Okay, so here I will say const GUI equals to new GUI. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to create an object with the properties of our box geometry. So we'll call it box data. So we say box data equals to an object. So within this object, then we'll have width. So our width will be equal to 1. We'll just set it to what we already have, and then our height will be 1 as well. Depth will make that 1. And then we've got our width segment that will be 10. So we've got that. So what we will do next is we will create a folder that we will add into our GUI. So we'll say const and we'll say box folder equals to GUI.add folder. And then inside we will give it the name. So we'll say box properties. Okay, not boy properties, but box. And so now that we have created that, then we will start adding all the different properties that we want into our folder. Okay, so we'll say box folder dot add, and then inside we will use our box data. That means all the information that we have in here, this is what we will be using. And so we'll start with our width. So we have to specify as a property. And then here we set the minimum and maximum amount that we want to play around with. Okay, so for the width, we'll start, the minimum will be 1. And then we can maybe max it out to 10. Okay, we'll say the maximum is 10. And so I'll just basically copy this and just create a few more. So instead of width, we'll have height. It will be the same. I want to have the same, I say most of the properties will be the same. And then I'll create more here, and then I'll say width segments. At the moment, the minimum will be, okay, the minimum we can make it, let's say 5, and then maximum 20. Okay, so that will be the standard. Okay, I'll just do that. Get rid of that. I'll say height segments and then depth segments. Okay, so that should be fine. Let's go back to our browser to see. Okay, but now our box is gone. Yes, it was a typo. So instead of segments, I typed segments. Okay, had to fix that also. Okay, so there we go. So now we've set that up, as you can see. So now we have our values, but at the moment these values are not doing anything. Okay, they're not doing anything for us. Okay, so now we need to continue so that we can make these things work. We're gonna create a function that's gonna create a new geometry for us. So we'll say const const new box geo equals to. So what we're gonna do here, then we're gonna say I'll say let new geometry equal to new 3 dot box geometry, and then in here then we will assign it the box data values. Okay, so we'll say box data dot width, say box data dot height, box data dot depth, and say box data dot width segments, box data dot height segments. It's quite a lot. Box data dot depth segments. Okay, so those are the values. Box data dot, oh, what the hell is this? So now that we've got that, the next step would be, so then we create a new geometry, and then after that, then we say box mesh dot geometry. So we're going to access the geometry, then say dot dispose. So we're going to get rid of that current geometry, and so we will assign it the new geometry, the one that we just created. That's the new geometry over there. So we'll say box mesh, say dot geometry equals new geometry. Okay, so that's how that's gonna work. Okay, so every time we make any changes to these values, it will call this function over here, and then it will basically assign the box mesh a new geometry which we just created. Okay, so this is how that's gonna work. So we'll say so dot on change. On change, we want you to call a new box geo. So now let's test that out and see how that works. You see? So basically that's what's gonna be happening. Okay. Alright, so we're gonna do the same here. I just like copying just to save myself the time. So copy that over there, and there, and there. Okay, so all of that is copied over. So let's go back, refresh, and let's see our height, depth. You see, so everything is working as it should. And as for the segments, you will not be able to see the segments because you can only see them if it's on wireframe. So the wireframe can only be set on a material. So since we're not covering material yet, I don't want to go into too much detail about that, but I'll just set it to true just so that you see what I'm talking about. You see, that is now. So I'll just make the width a little bigger, the height also, and then when I change the segments, then you can see the width segments are changing. Bring them down. You see the height segments are changing, and over there the width segment. So let's kind of, so that you can see it a lot better. Okay, so that's what that does. It just basically gives you all this detail over here. So the next thing that we're going to do, what we're going to do also is to just also add some ability to change the position of our 3D object. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to set up values for our position. We can even do rotation, and we will also add the ability to turn our material visible or invisible. The point is so that we can be able to have just one object on the screen and evaluate that without having too much clutter. Okay, but there will not be any explanation on materials as yet, since this is all about geometry. So I will just copy this. I like copying, makes life easy. Now, as you heard before, I said that there are different ways that we can go about this, and this is another method that we can just use. Instead of using the data over here, I will just kind of dial direct, so what that means is that I will just go straight to the box mesh, because here I'm not making any changes to the geometry. I just want to make changes to the mesh itself. Okay, so I'll say dot position. Okay, then I'll just change each one. Mesh dot position, I'll say X, and that'll be Y. I'll say Z. So that's what I want that to do. So when I change these values, then I want it to influence the position of our geometry. So let's go. Yeah, so we should have these values now. Okay, as you can see, that works, even though that was a bit odd. Okay, I would like to have at least some more freedom in terms of how far I can move. Okay, let's just make that -20, right? So the minimum will be -20, so I can go to the left or to the right without any with the 20 units to each side, basically. So -20, again -20. All right, so basically with that, I just helps me to take off from where I am, you know, so wherever the value is at, that's where it will start incrementing, okay, instead of jumping from one value to the other, if you understand what I mean. So yeah, so now I can do all of that. I can do that, change my with segments. Maybe I can also try to bring these down to like 1. Let's see, let's try 1. Cool. So now we can reduce this all the way to like the bare, you know, minimum. And so we can move it around, bring it down, bring it down, bring it down. So this is what you get by default. Yeah, I think we're good now. Okay, another, we can also add some rotation, okay. Some rotation, so instead of position, then we'll say rotation. So the minimum will be minus, I'll say math dot pi times 2. What am I doing? 2. Okay, so these are the values that I want to work with. Just copy that over here. There we go. There we go. What's the problem now? Okay. Okay, so now we should be able to now have rotation. Okay. Whoa. What the hell? Okay, wait. Here's a better way. Let's just say 0. Okay, I'm gonna make that 0. There we go. So now I think we can just work better with that. Why is it so snappy? Yes, that's better. Okay, so here are our values and we can play around with them as we please. But this is also a bit confusing now because you don't understand what that is. Okay, only we know. The best way to get that to give us, well, to differentiate between position and rotation would be to use this over here. Okay, since I wanted to illustrate the point, I decided to show you this method where you can just kind of dial direct. But just to kind of make this more efficient, I will use the box data instead, okay, because I just want to be thorough. So I'm just going to delete that, and then I'll just copy this stuff over here. I will bring that over here, then I will add some more values over here. So I will say rotation rotation x 0, so rotation y 0, rotation z, that will be 0. Okay, fine. So now we've got that. So I'll say rotation x, rotation y, rotation z. Okay. Once again, the values here will be 0, 0 0, and we'll say math, say math dot pi times 2. Let's copy that. Okay, so we will not be calling new box geo. Instead, we will be we're gonna use this method. So we have another function that we create, and then we say box mesh dot rotation dot x equals to value. So we're just gonna do that for our here for the y value, and then here for our z value. Okay, so basically now you have different methods that you can use. This is how you change values. Each one works better in different situations. So yeah, now that we have that, we can go back again. So then we'll have a more organized system over here. See, so now we can identify that's rotation. So here we just kind of know that it's position. Don't want to overcomplicate this because I want this to be a short tutorial, but doesn't seem like it's gonna be, but that's fine. As long as you are learning something, that's the most important thing, as long as I'm not wasting your time. Okay, so we've got all of that. That's beautiful. I think that's pretty cool. So yeah, so in a nutshell, that's how you create a cube. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna replicate this same method, and we're gonna do it for the other 5 geometries. Okay, so one other thing that I forgot is the settings for the material, right? Because we wanted to add that so that we have the ability to turn the visibility on and off, and also the wireframe, so that we do not have, so that I don't have to go inside and like manually code or to comment out the wireframe values. Okay, so now that we've got that covered, I'll just put it right at the bottom. Okay, so I will say here, I can just copy these values over here. Okay, so I'll say box mesh dot material dot wireframe. Okay, material wireframe. So let's do that. Same here, we'll say it will say visibility. Or is it visible? I'll say visible. Okay, so the minimum values will be 0 stands for false, and 1 stands for true. Okay, so that should work. Yes, so now we can toggle our wireframe on and off. Okay, so if you want to see all these details, then you can turn your wireframe on, and then visibility also. So when we have other objects on the screen, then we can just turn off all the others so that we can focus on one. Okay, cool. So now we're going to jump on to the next one.